edition 27 of the All Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we are interested in serial killers, and as long as we're doing this podcast, it does stop us from writing to them in prison.
Absolutely. Sorry, it's been a bit of a wait, but
we've been very busy.
We're very busy, important women. It sounds like we've been killing people ourselves.
Yeah, it does actually. We were having a cooling off period for the podcast so we could concentrate on our murders.
Yeah. The net started closing in. Speaking of which, this will probably get a cut, but hello to American listeners. So over here we have a program called Eggheads, which is like a tea time quiz show. Oh, I found out. I don't think I can say. I'm going to say it anyway. And on it is a guy called CJ DeMaio or something. DeMaio, and he is an arrogant cunt. And he casually released a autobiography saying he thought he killed a man. And he's recently been arrested because people are like, "We're gonna have to follow that up."
Yeah. So claimed he just pushed him in a canal, didn't they?
Well, some guy jumped out and tried to mug him in Amsterdam, and he punched him, knocked him out, and then just pushed him into the canal. And he sort of signed off with, "I can only presume he's dead," and thought there'd be no negative repercussions. And to be honest, he's such a Z-list celebrity. I think he thought no one would read the autobiography, but he's just been arrested for it. I don't know why I brought this up.
He's been arrested for the autobiography because it was so bad, or for the potential murder.
I think it's for how high he plucks his eyebrows. But I found out, right? I don't know, I might have to cut this. I think it'll be fine. People who know Eggheads, he's so annoying. Like, he's the most annoying one. Now, what happened was my friend was in charge of going around and watching loads of pub quizzes and picking the best people to get this super team. So he picked it, and they went back and they went, no one could beat this team. They're too brilliant. So what they did is they binned off one of them and replaced him with CJ to make them more like make them easier to beat. So, but CJ does not act like he knows this.
So he's not as smart as he thinks.
Not as smart. He's the weak link who's been added in.
Oh, CJ.
He's the Achilles heel, a murderous Achilles heel.
Well, he might be the weak link in the clink if this continues. Thank you very much.
That was worth waiting for, wasn't it?
Wasn't it just? You can't cut that now. It's got to stay in.
So this is episode 27. It's a really big one. So settle down. The ones of you who listen to this when you're going to bed and then have nightmares that you blame us for.
Yeah, and also my voice is a little raspier than usual because I have a chest infection.
Is that what you've got?
So that's why I sound slightly sexy.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
It's a bit woodbiney, isn't it?
Dry. Yeah. Sound very dry.
So Andrei Chikatilo is also known as the Butcher of Rostov, the Red Ripper, and the Rostov Ripper.
And the Forest something or other.
Forest Strip.
The Forest
Murder.
Strip. Yeah.
The artist formerly known as that. For a while he was going under a symbol.
Yeah, there's a lot of names.
It's because they thought he was a lot of different murderers at different points.
Yeah.
So he was eventually prosecuted for 52 murders, women and children, confessed to 56 and was tried for 53. I think that's weird. So basically he got tried for 53 and then was found guilty of 52. And if I was on that jury, I'd be like, does it really matter if he did that? Why don't we just chuck that in as well?
Just chuck him in.
And that's solved then.
Yeah.
So we can tell you all about him, and it is a classic. If you've got your serial killer bingo cards there, I mean, I think we're going to have a full house.
This is a bit, yeah, definitely. Classic. He was born on the 16th of October 1936 in Yabloknoy, which is a village in the rural part of the Ukraine, which was referred to as the breadbasket. Was it?
Yeah, the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, because they were obviously producing loads of bread, but because it was under Soviet rule, they couldn't actually eat any of it.
Yeah.
They had to wait for the government to poorly sort of hand it back to them. But as a result, he basically grew up where everyone was starving.
Yeah, because it was called agricultural collectivism. The farmers had to
Great band name.
Yeah, wonderful band.
Yeah, but they all went to art school.
They had to, so all the farmers, that's what they had to do, had to give all their crops over and then have it redistributed.
Yeah, but Stalin was no good with a spreadsheet, so just loads of them were starving.
And it was famine, hardship, very depressing time to be alive, and the population was dying because people were starving to death. Nobody had anything to eat. And there was also bombing raids as well when the USSR entered the war against Germany. So there was heavy bombing, and it just wasn't a very...
Yeah, apparently his family used to eat grass and leaves to help sustain themselves, and he claims that he hadn't had bread until the age of 12.
Wow. I think that's the same diet that Kanye West's daughter's on, isn't it? You put that bread down, honey. No carbs until you're a teenager.
We're going to break the internet and your spirit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I might have told this on the podcast before, but this is one of my favourite things that apparently, so when he was, not one of my favourite things, I quite like dogs.
Yeah.
But he was told, when you were a kid growing up under Soviet rule during the, when was this, the 30s, late 30s, early 40s, apparently you were told as a kid that if you saw a healthy man, that you were to run away from him, because if a man was healthy, it was the clearest indicator that he'd turn to cannibalism. Because apparently that was quite common, that they would stack up the bodies of the dead in the graveyard and just leave them, because people would come and cut bits off and cook them. Ooh. It was sold on like a black market, human meat. Kids were told, in some cases, kids were snatched off the street, they thought. And in fact, he thought this had happened to his brother, Stepan, didn't he? Yeah,
this is what he was told. His mother said that he was taken away by cannibals and eaten.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like a cautionary tale, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because they said that there's no proof that Stepan was even born, and no proof that the neighbours cannibalised him, which is what she claimed.
Yeah.
But as fucking disciplinary measures go, that's pretty extreme.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very weird lie to tell, isn't it?
I didn't know she had the energy to tell that story. Everyone just sounds so hungry. It's like, Mummy, tell me your story again. No, just go to sleep, mate.
And they're so hungry, they probably hallucinated having an extra brother anyway.
Well, they all shared the same bed as well, didn't they? They were very, very, obviously very poor.
Yeah, lived in a one-room hut.
His father was sent away, well, conscripted into the army during World War II, was it?
Yeah, it would have been if it was 36.
And he, obviously, it's like, I've just forgotten everything I've ever learned. What's wrong with me today? And his mum, apparently, well, she had a child while the father was away, and they think it was because she was raped by a German soldier. So there was a lot going on.
That's the most casual way of putting it.
There was a lot going on.
But it is grim. It paints this horrible picture of just grey, grass-eating kids everywhere, and being brought up by his mother in a one-roomed hut. They shared a bed. He was a bedwetter, so every time he wet the bed, his mum used to beat him.
They think he had water on the brain as well.
Yeah, and they said that this has affected his bladder. I don't know how that works.
He said that
it's got to go somewhere.
Well, he said he had water on the brain, and this caused urinary tract infections, bedwetting, and erectile problems from water on the brain. I'm going to start using that as a, if someone's not in the mood. What's up with you? Got water on the brain, have you?
Water on those two tiny-looking brains.
Tiny brains.
I wasn't a bedwetter. One of my brothers was a bedwetter. I won't say which one, but it's the one who doesn't listen to this podcast, so it's fine. But I think it's a big stigma, isn't it? And especially if you're sharing a bed with your mum as well, you're like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
You can't hide it.
No, you
can't go and put your stuff in the wash.
I was a bedwetter as well, but I just think my brain hadn't matured enough to make me get up in the night to have a wee.
Lazy brain.
Yeah, lazy brain. So it's a bit like the amount of times I wake up and be like, halfway through a wee, but oh god, here we go again. But obviously, you get older, your brain does. I've never wet the bed drunk either. I know a lot of people do that.
Yeah,
never
do that, don't they? My and just that whole getting. I think I've wet the bed like once or something, and like getting up and having to like put everything in the wash. My friend told me the other day, I won't name his name, but it's a very funny story, that the reason he knows how to wash clothes is because he accidentally jizzed on his own t-shirt. He went down to his mum and he was like, Mum, I've been thinking I should do some more stuff around the house, so can you tell me how I would go about washing an item? Probably a boil wash. You'll need to get everything out of it. And she's like, no problem, son.
I'll put money on she knew.
She knew.
She knew.
Oh my god, my boyfriend told me the other day the amount of times that his sister or his mum has walked in on him wanking.
Really?
Yeah, it's insane. Because he was like, oh, you know when you're like a teenager and you're like lying on top, it's like an afternoon wank and you're lying on top of the covers. I'm like, no, absolutely not. What are you, fucking Hugh Hefner? Get under the sheets and have some shame. You're a Catholic, for fuck's sake.
He has like afternoon tea time, pre-theatre. Like, he's got different kinds of...
different types of wanking. I remember when I stayed at a friend's house, off the wanking subject now, but when I can't sleep, I sleep upside down, so not as in like handstand on the wall, like a bat.
Yeah.
I sleep with my feet at the bottom of my head at the bottom of my feet on the pillow, and I still do that now. If I can't get to sleep, that's the last thing I'll try. But I went through a stage of just sleeping like that generally, and I was staying at a friend's house. I also was going through a stage of having nosebleeds. So I sort of slept with my head under the duvet, And she just had a nosebleed in the night, and I was just like, oh, I'm really sorry, there's blood on the bed. And then she sort of took me aside and had this, like, the period chat with me. I was about 11, and I was like, oh, no, it's not that. And she's like, it's okay, you have become a woman, and I feel very privileged that you've done it in my house.
It is
like,
slightly inconvenient, but that's fine.
That Kath Kitson's bed set's got to be binned now, but... now you're gonna need to use one of these. And I was like, no, honestly, it's from my nose. And she's like, okay, if that's what we're calling it, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, just being forced into having a period by a stranger.
Just the most awkward scenario for any sort of child in it, like pre-puberty. Just don't do your friend's mum talking to you about stuff like that.
I went, this is going to get cut if I've not said it already. Did I tell you about that period ritual I was made to do?
No.
Oh, fucking hell. So, my primary school... I'm not sure we've got time for these diversions, because we've got a lot of murder to get through. Oh, fucking hell. So, my friend in primary school was a bit of a hippie. Her mum was like a Reiki healer. And we got taken to this place called Dance Camp. And it's in, like, Norfolk or something. And it's just like a festival in a field with a load of hippies, so... And we were made to do this sort of... You got teamed up with an older person... and like an older girl, and you got made to do this ritual where you would dress in white, and then you would walk behind, like, it was just women there. Oh my god, I feel like I've been in a cult. Like, when you're saying it out loud,
concerned, mate.
For fuck's sake. So dress in white, and then you go behind this bush, and then you get changed into red, and then you'd walk out from behind the bush and go through an archway, and this woman would go, what's your name? Out the corner of her mouth, and you go, Kiri. And she'd go, Kiri is now a woman. You'd have to walk through this arch and everyone would, like, clap. And it was sort of like a ritual to encourage... I guess it's, in a way, it's a good thing to, like, encourage women to, like... or girls to not be ashamed. And it's a good thing. And, you know, there's no stigma. And then we just sort of, like, sat around in a circle having, like... Well, women told embarrassing stories about when they came on in inconvenient places.
It sounds like my worst nightmare. Honest to God, that sounds like... I would rather be sacrificed to some, like, non-existent god on a pedestal.
That was probably the next bit, but I had to go for a drumming workshop.
I couldn't...
It's like Alcoholics Anonymous, but for menstruating.
Oh, God, no. I'd die on the spot. I would die. I couldn't cope with that.
But you can't, like, I couldn't be the only girl, because I was like, this is weird. Even at, like, 11, I was like, this is odd. And I was like, I can't be the only one not do it. You know, this is how it starts, and I wouldn't be the guy folding his arms in that picture of Nazis all saluting. I'd be the one who's like, well, when in Rome.
I'm concerned about what the next workshop would have been. Like, well, got the periods. Now, what this man is dressed as a penis for one good reason. Oh, God, it's horrible.
Yeah, it is weird, and I feel weird I've said it out loud, so please don't. I bet this is going to be the thing that everyone fucking picks up on Twitter and tweets me about, because I didn't pay any attention to when I told that story about sometimes pretending to Jim that I couldn't use the toilet. Yeah. And now people keep coming up to Jim and going, does she really make you get her out of bed? And he's like, oh, for fuck's sake. Yes, she does.
But anyway, back to the murders. So
his father Roman was drafted into the Red Army. And
he was captured as a prisoner, which was seen as a really terrible thing then. It wasn't seen as... You know, how terrible is being taken prisoner. It was, you're a wimp.
Yeah.
You're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, so he's a son of a coward,
yeah.
wasn't he?
And Andrei Chikatilo was bullied for this at school. And it didn't help that he was also painfully shy, a bit of a swot.
Yeah.
And he used to read a lot of communist literature. It's quite hard to say, communist literature.
Yeah.
So he was picked on and had a bit of a miserable life. Looked a bit of a geek as well. He had big glasses and he wasn't doing very well.
Apparently he refused glasses. I read this somewhere because he thought that would make him be bullied more. So he really needed them, but he couldn't read very well because he was like, oh God, if I get glasses as well, I bet his teeth were a state as well, because I can't have glasses and a brace and be impotent and bullied.
And this built-up shoe is just the last straw. I can't have it.
It was a weird thing because, as well as being like, you know, all this Soviet starvation, he witnessed the Blitzkrieg and the... Am I saying it right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Blitzkrieg. And all the results. So there was just bodies on the side of the road, and he said it was terrifying but exciting at the same time. And one report says that one night he and his mother were forced, is the word they used, to watch their hut burn to the ground. Who's forcing them to do that?
Close
That's
your
their
eyes.
choice.
Yeah.
I know you've not got a telly, but you don't have to watch your 2 possessions get burned.
We were forced to watch the hut being burnt. He had a very strange sexual experience at 17.
He did, yeah.
Where
Haven't we all?
I know. I'm still having them now, mate. Where he overpowered a girl, I think it was a couple of years younger than him. I think it was one of his sister's friends. And during the struggle, it doesn't say why he was overpowering her, probably some game of, I don't know, pass the bread or something. I don't know what they played in those days.
Pass the imaginary bread.
Like
that scene in Hook.
Yeah. And he just ejaculated during the struggle.
Yeah, it's really weird. So he was impotent, but he could ejaculate. And having this struggle with this girl sort of brought it on. So he was like, that's what I like, it's the struggle. Yeah. But to me, my next leap wouldn't be, I'm going to go and kill some people. It would be, I'm going to try and change my own duvet when I'm alone in the house and see what happens. Or I'm going to try and buy a new dress from Topshop where it says it's a 14, but it's clearly fucking not. And then I'm going to get it stuck in my head as I'm going to try and take it off.
Yes.
And I've got to buy it for that weekend because I'm a bridesmaid.
That would... you've been there. That is an actual thing that's happened to you, isn't
it? Every about 6 months I go through that where I think, I'm going to have to ask a girl with 2 GCSEs to cut me out of this dress. And I've taken my bra off because it's not the kind of dress you can wear with a bra.
What a stress! That would definitely cause him to spudge, wouldn't it?
Oh my god! I mean, I've generally thought about like punching a mirror and using the shard to cut myself out the dress.
I was going to say to cut your own throat. That's not that bad. And he had aspirations academically, didn't he? He wanted to go to Moscow State University. In 1953, he failed the entrance exam. Mm-hmm. He then went into national service, which was compulsory. Yeah,
3 years, 1957 to 1960. Yep. So he's been in the army, so that's another tick on the box.
One, yeah. And then he moved to a very long name place.
Oh, yeah.
Rodin somewhere, and this was near Rostov, and in 1960, and he worked as a telephone engineer.
Yeah, and his girlfriend, well, maybe, his sister was like, you need to meet someone. She set him up with a girl who ended up becoming his wife in 1963.
Faina was her name. They got married, obviously had 2 kids, which was strange because they had a very odd.
She really wanted kids, and she knew that he was impotent, so she's like, well, I think we can find a way around this. So what he used to do was so this is so mad. So he was impotent, but he could ejaculate, which means he was ejaculating out of a flaccid penis, which is the only way to make an ejaculating penis look worse, is to have it flat, looking like it's sneezing.
It's just horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah. So they used to get the semen out, presumably roll it, when you're trying to get the last out of the toothpaste.
Ugh.
And then he used to push it in with his fingers. But it worked. They had 2 kids this way.
Amazingly, it worked. I don't know how it works.
It's mad all these middle-class families are spending so much money on IVF, and all the time they could be doing that. It's
just incredible, isn't it? Incredible. You see, they had a daughter and a son, and Ludmila was a daughter and Yuri was a son, and they seemed like a normal family from the outside, nothing particularly strange about them. He became a teacher in 1971.
Yeah, because he actually did a correspondence course, which I think is Open University, and then he went to Rostov University and he graduated. He got a degree in Russian literature, which is quite aspirational because he kept trying to get into universities. It's such a disconnect for me that he would be sitting there reading Chekhov and then going, I'll go home to Mrs. later, probably spunk in my hand and push it into a vag and then we'll see what's for tea. Yeah. It's such a weird thing to be lofty, reading this heavy, Dostoevsky, and yet pushing spunk into your wife at night.
Well, what interests me is how he would have managed to ejaculate. What did he have to do?
Oh yeah,
to ejaculate. What was he doing?
A struggle
to make.
Maybe he was patting his head and rubbing his belly at the same time, and that's what did it for him.
Well, he must have been doing something because he could only get off on a struggle and violence. So something was.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah. The mechanics of how he actually got there.
Yeah, I don't really know why I'm thinking about it, but I have thought about it.
Well, we've got to be thorough in these podcasts, haven't we?
Just you wait till I get home tonight and I spunk in my hand and
Oh, God.
shove it up your...
Spider-Manning a woman. It's horrible, isn't it? Really, really horrible.
There was no respect for him at these schools that he worked at, and rightly so, as it turned out. He had a nickname of Goose,
Yeah.
which was a bit of an insult, apparently.
Yeah, because Goose is like, they called him the Goose, the other staff thought he was odd. I think Goose is a term for like a fool, like a pathetic fool. Well, like a goose, like an idiot.
Yeah, like a bit of a duffer.
Which, when you think about him pushing semen into his wife's vagina to get her pregnant, really sort of reevaluates Top Gun, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Quite the director's cut that would have been.
He was also committing sexual assaults on the kids at the school.
Yeah.
But this was ignored, largely.
He used to watch them in the toilets and things like that, and then he started actually molesting them. So the parents complained, and he was moved on. He was... and then he moved to a boys' boarding school, and he was one of the dormitory wardens. Don't give him that job if he's been struck off from his last one. And the boy woke up, and he was trying to fillet him. Chikatilo was trying to fillet the boy, for clarity. And then the boy was like, stop trying to suck me off. And then like the sixth one was beat him up. So he was fired in March 1981. Which shows how bad it is that they couldn't wait till the end of term. Because there's only like 2 or 3 months for them to sit out, isn't it?
So he was fired in 1981. He'd actually committed his first murder before then.
Yep.
His first murder was on the 22nd December 1978. They moved to the town of Shakhty, near Rostov. In Rostov, rather. And it was a 9-year-old girl, Lena Zakotnova, who he lured to an abandoned... It said shed, but it was actually his second home.
Yeah.
He bought a second home.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that they're like, oh, it's very poor. His second home. But that's why you think it's just a shed, don't you, with a chair in it.
Yeah. And he lured her to think. What he was doing to entice young girls or boys to him, as it turned out, was he would pretend he had bubblegum, which is quite rare in the Ukraine at the time and Russia. It's quite difficult to come by. So he'd say, oh, I've got some chewing gum, do you want it? He also used to say... do you want to come and see some rare stamps?
Yeah, if they weren't cool kids who like chewing gum, he's like, better try the stamps.
Yeah. Or there was another one. Do you want to come and see my coin collection?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was another one.
What was it, Antiques Roadshow?
I don't know what would lure me to.
I don't. Oasis tickets?
Yeah, do you want to? Yeah, but they split up. Yeah, but I've got Oasis in this band on the corner. They've got back together. Do you want to? You're all right. Can I come and see?
I think if they were like, as an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet around the corner, I'd be like, all right.
All right,
in that
okay.
van, that's fine.
In that dirty van, brilliant. But this poor girl, he managed to get to the hut that he bought, the other house. He tried to rape her. She struggled. He strangled her and slashed her with a knife, and then he ejaculated. Which this is where he obviously realises this is what I'm into.
Oh, it's so horrible.
It's
She's
horrible.
only 9, this girl, and it's 3 days before Christmas,
Yeah.
which bothers me.
It does. You don't like that.
No, I don't like it.
And also, she's another classic for your serial killer bingo, in my opinion. Bus stop. She was waiting at a bus stop. A lot of these murders start off at a bus station or a train station.
Yeah.
So always, this is what, just don't get the bus.
Sort of killed her, he thought, and then went and dumped her in the river along with her school bag. But apparently they don't think she was dead when her body was dumped, which is so sad. Now, this could all have ended here. Because...
And it should have done.
It should have done, because there was loads of evidence linking him. So he was seen, someone of his description was seen with the little girl, the last person that was seen alive with her, taking her away. Blood from her was found near his house in the snow. Witnesses had seen him at the bus stop with her. They went and interviewed him, and they just thought nothing of it. It was never prosecuted.
It's absolutely ridiculous. There was someone else as well.
Yeah, because they said that the guy that was with him was in the 40s. They said that this guy was tall, he had glasses. So they arrested this 25-year-old, didn't they, called Alexander
Kravchenko. Alexander Kravchenko, who had a previous rape conviction. He was arrested and confessed under duress, probably because the interrogation was quite brutal. And he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the family was so angry, he was actually executed.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, that he was on trial in 1979 for this. And while he was on trial, he recanted his confession. He said that, no, they coerced me into that. And also it's like, I've never worn glasses. Like, that's a prop that you can't get. I've never worn a Groucho Marx disguise. But he was still convicted. So, yeah, sentenced to 15 years. And the family said this is not tough enough, which is fair enough because their 9-year-old daughter's dead. So he was retried, and then he was executed in July 1983.
Now, Chikatilo was a bit shocked by this because he stopped killing. This is his first murder, and it was obviously such a panic for him. He didn't kill again, allegedly, for 3 years.
Do you think that if someone is executed incorrectly for a crime that you caused, that you should then be charged for their murder? I'm just throwing this around now.
I think there should be some comeuppance. I think there should be some questions asked, and I think there should be wrist slaps.
I'm just trying to figure out on your scale of right-wingness where this fits in.
Well, on this scale, I do think somebody should be held accountable for...
Yeah, it's probably not the murderer, though. It's probably the people who wrongly convicted or...
Manslaughter, really.
Do you think?
It's a difficult one. It is. You did get it wrong, so...
They can sue for compensation.
Negligence.
Yeah, something like that, innit?
Gross misconduct.
A written warning, at least.
Yeah.
1 holiday
2 days suspended for a week.
So he realised that that murder made him realise that it was the way for him to orgasm correctly, in inverted commas, was the stabbing. That's what made him do it. So yeah, it was a couple of years later, September 1981, he went for his next victim.
Now this is interesting because after he'd done his first murder and he's still getting abused for touching kids at school, he's actually made redundant after the first murder, and he took a job at a raw materials factory in Rostov, and this was very handy for him because it allowed him to travel around and gave him access to victims.
Yes.
So he was travelling about all over, as comedians do, and he was in different towns and different stations and bus stations, and this gave him a good opportunity to come into contact with a lot of the people that he ended up murdering. But in September 1981, as you said, Lanska Tachenko, she was his next victim. He was a bit shocked by this one because she was quite sexually experienced, wasn't she?
She was 17, yeah, and she used to sort of swap sexual favours with soldiers for like food and things like that, and drinks and stuff. So she wasn't a very innocent 9-year-old. Not that she was guilty or anything. I just mean that she wasn't like this normal kid. So they went into the forest because she was like, I'm going to get dinner if I take a shot in the mouth. Not as in they're one and the same thing. But and then he couldn't get an erection. And he started to really like aggressively take her clothes off. So she was like, this isn't for me. And then he turned, he sort of snapped. So he attacked her. He didn't have we're trying not to be too graphic about any of this stuff, but it's horrific. The things
if you want to read about that kind of stuff, you can do. It's all online. It's just not very pleasant, is it?
Yeah. So he attacked her with he didn't have a knife. So they found his teeth marks on her and a stick that he used to mutilate. It was horrible. Apparently, when he talked about the murder afterwards, he said when she had died, because he'd bitten off her nipple, which is so awful, he was dancing for joy around the corpse, and then he just buried her where she was, which is what he used to do. He used, apart from one case, he used to bury them where they were killed in like a shallow grave or whatever, or just, I think he just covered her with some branches and then left her because she was found the next day.
He must have looked an absolute tip after doing all these murders.
Yeah.
Because these are all during the day, more or less, a lot of them, and he's doing all these horrific things to people and mutilating them, and
I wonder, because he's always described as having like this big overcoat, whether he took the coat off so everything was soaked underneath, and then would put the coat on afterwards and it would cover it up.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, put a bit of thought into that.
Yes. After this murder, though, he really got hit his stride, because between July and December 1982, there was 6 murders of people aged between 9 and 19.
Yeah, his next one was June 1982. It was on a business trip, which allowed him to go to another area. So it was a 13-year-old called Lyubov Berekhyev. Sorry, I'm saying it wrong. Another bus stop. He tried to rape her, but that didn't work. So what he would do, he would try to rape them, and when he wasn't able to because of his impotence, he would get, I was going to say very aggressive, but he would attack them then and kill them. Yeah. And he had a thing about the eyes. A lot of his... This is one of the first ones where a lot of the eyes were damaged or gouged or cut or stabbed. And there's a couple of theories for that. It might be like a psychological thing of like, don't look at me, or it's to do with a superstition, you think?
There's an old superstition. Where they've said if you murder somebody, they can find who murdered them by looking in the victim's eyes, because the imprint of the murderer will be on the eyes because they're the last thing they saw. So as we know, that's not true.
That's a shit, yeah.
Because if anyone got murdered, it'd just be a case of having a look into the eyes.
Yeah, that'd be good, that, wouldn't it?
That's where the phrase "a real eye opener" comes from.
Really?
No, I made that up.
Oh, dickhead. You know what? You could have got away with that. You could have just not said anything.
Yeah.
And I would have told everyone that listened that. I'm like a sucker for trivia like that. But he killed her in the summer, and it was 2 weeks before she was found, and she was really badly decomposed by then. And then 3... So, like, he just went crazy. So he killed 1 in July, 2 in August that were 3 days apart, 2 in September that were a week apart, another one in December. God. And then he started to kill young males as well, because he was doing different types of victims. When he killed the males, he would usually castrate them, and they thought that he was either eating the testicles or taking them with him, because he's, you know, one of the good guys. Now, the local police department, here they come, the Keystone Cops, had no experience in serial killers. In fact, it was sort of denied that they existed under the Soviet Union. It was a Western construct.
Yeah, a Western thing.
We've had this before, haven't we, with the last one? And the only reason we know so much about this case, which we do compare it to Yang Xinghai, is the fact that the Soviet state sort of dissolved, and this is the first big thing to happen. So they went berserk, and the media really covered it because they had freedom. They weren't state sanctioned anymore. So they were looking for 2 killers. They were looking for one who killed girls and one who killed boys. Yeah. Also, 2 of the victims were killed outside of Rostov, so they weren't even in the jurisdiction. So he was kind of getting away with it because they were looking in the wrong places for the wrong thing.
Because obviously as well, they don't assume people travel to do things. A bit like London promoters that assume that you can't come down from Manchester to London to do a gig. So it's a lot like that. You can tell that that's happened to me this week. I'm quite raw about that.
You want to stab their eyes out, mate? That's what you want to do.
I think I might do, yeah.
So in December, he killed... in December of that year, it was a 10-year-old. I hated it. It's so young. And then he took 6 months off.
Had a bit of a rest. Yeah. Because he's done shitloads, really.
He's had a busy old year, hasn't he?
He has.
Sometimes it's good to just take stock of where you are. Laura Sarkinson was the next one. She was a 15-year-old Armenian. In the timeline, she's who's come next. But they only found her because he confessed when he eventually got caught, and he led them to the grave, and that was one of the... Because they thought for a while he might have... Because he confessed to so many, they're like, he's a bullshitter. But he was like, you will go here, you will find this, it will be buried like this. And they were like, oh, shit. Oh, yeah. But he said he explained his... when he was being arrested, he explained his method was to pick vagrants, which I hate the word, as people who are homeless. It is because they were invisible. Under Soviet rule, basically, if you were homeless, you didn't exist, which meant that they didn't have a problem with homeless people. So they would never be reported because that person doesn't exist. They would only ever become a problem if the bodies were found, which is why he could get away with burying them in shallow graves, and as long as, you know, a dog or something didn't pull them up, they would get away with it because people weren't looking for them.
It's very interesting as well. I meant to say, he's obviously picking these people. We should have mentioned this a bit earlier when the other fella was executed for being Chikatilo, being the murderer. His wife gave him an alibi. And I'm wondering, he's doing all this stuff. He's obviously going home looking a state. She's giving him an alibi.
Do you think she knew?
Yeah, I think she knew.
Yeah, because that's the reason why in the first case, because it was the first girl he killed, she said... She told her school friend, a man told me he can get imported chewing gum. A nice old man, he's going to take me to his special house. And Chikatilo was described, he was interviewed... But they were like, oh no, his wife said it wasn't him. And that's why they ignored all the blood and things.
And probably from his wife's point of view, she maybe chose to ignore it because you think people were very poor. He had a job, he was providing for the family.
Do you think?
He wasn't touching kids at the school and being embarrassed, and he was doing a different job. I think she must have known.
Well, this case is one of the first cases that really puts a psychologist at the centre of it, because they think that he definitely is the reason that he was caught, because he got them to confess. We'll get to that later. But he said, I don't know if he's married or not, but if he has a wife, she does... I mean, this you can fill in the gaps here. She lets him get on with his own shit and doesn't ask him where he's been or what he's been up to. Yeah. It could be that she just doesn't give a fuck or is fucking someone else.
Yeah, there is that. That's a possibility, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, if someone is having to push semen into your vagina with his fingers, I might wonder.
I like that I'm giving away exactly what my boundaries are. Well, you would, wouldn't you? You definitely cheat on him. Definitely. The police were concentrating on all kinds of people at this point. So they were concentrating on the mentally ill. They were concentrating on known paedophiles, sex offenders, and homosexuals.
It's like the Catholic Church, isn't it?
It was bad as well because a lot of mentally ill people actually confess to the crimes.
Yeah, as they do.
As they do, especially under intense interrogation.
Yeah. Soviet interrogation.
It's Soviet interrogation. 3 gay people and a convicted sex offender committed suicide because of the methods of interrogation.
Yeah.
Which is just awful, really. At this point, it is starting to get that they are going to have to start admitting that there is a serial killer.
Yeah. Well,
and that was a big turning point, wasn't it?
So what happened was that the militia, the Moscow militia, sent for this Major Mikhail Fetisov because they were like, there's just too many. By 1983, there was 14 more victims and 6 found. One of them was Lydia Kutsiamba. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. She's a 24-year-old female. Is unidentified, in fact, for ages. It was him who retrospectively gave her the details. Because they just knew that it was an 18 to 25-year-old, which is very much at the top of in the wage bracket. I think I would be fucking gutted if I rocked up. You know, if I was dead and they were like, 36-year-old, I'd be like, oh, come on! Yeah. It's like the final insult, isn't it? Because one of them, they did a forensic test, and I was reading something about it that was really salacious, and like they knew 3 things. That she had pubic hair lice, that she'd just eaten, and then it was something else really unflattering where I'm like, keep it to yourself! Yeah, like, that doesn't help the case.
That's just nasty gossip, isn't it?
That's not curtain twitching.
That's not helpful to anybody.
So what happened was that this guy got dropped in this Mikhail, and he reviewed the police, and he was like, oh my god, this is awful. Because they thought that there was 6 different killers, and he was like, no, this is the work of a single killer, but they wouldn't use the phrase serial killer because they thought that was a Western phenomenon. So Rostov basically had 400 murders in 1 year, and he was like, we really need to get on top of things around here.
That's incredible, that amount.
But to be fair, the police were dog shit, the local police, but once this guy got brought in, they seemed to really kick things off. So they got in a special squad, including a forensic analyst, called Viktor Burakov. Now, the department was called the Division of Especially Serious Crimes, which sounds like something a kid would put on a desk in front of them. Knock, knock, mummy. Welcome to the Division of Especially Serious Crimes, or something
or something like Harry Potter meets crime. Is there a department for the mildly concerning,
vexatious crimes? Yeah. But there was all sorts of stuff that they came up with. I think that actually, you'll never hear me say this, but I thought they were really thorough. So they took loads of blood samples. They knew that the person was AB blood type. Now, what comes out later is that he was actually a secretor, which means that his semen and his blood type don't always match. Very rare thing that happens.
Yes.
So
Wasn't the Yorkshire Ripper?
He was a secretor as well. Yeah. I mean, what is that about? What's the chances of that happening?
Very,
They also found that he was influenced by the weather. When the barometer dropped, the killings would start. So they thought he was affected. It would affect something in his brain. It was always midweek killings, Tuesday to Thursday, because there's no Orange Wednesday back in the 80s.
Tuesday to Thursday.
They're off nights for gigs as well, aren't they?
Yeah, I was just thinking that. And he's spending time at home at the weekend. Madness.
So this is all pre-computer as well, so this is all on written cards. So they had the blood type, but that's 10% of the population of Europe, the AB blood type. Yeah. So it hasn't narrowed it down much. So they questioned everyone. When the blood type didn't match, they were released. Because he was arrested, Chikatilo, shortly afterwards at a bus stop, but he didn't match, so he was released.
Yeah.
Now then, they arrest this guy who was knocking around a bus stop being a bit weird, called Shaborov. Now, he confessed to stealing a car, and then he confessed to killing people. And he said that there was a gang of people. Now, this guy had learning difficulties. Well, he'd just been let out of a mental health facility, a hospital, basically.
I'm glad you said that. I was going to say not hatch.
Yeah, no, well, I didn't want to say anything like that, but we're there now, aren't we? So
the tone has been lowered. Continue.
He met these other guys, and they confessed to 7 of the murders between them. But they gave no details, didn't know what happened to them, didn't know where they were buried. And then when they got brought into custody, they confessed to even more murders. And then the police were like, it's a gang of madmen that have been doing it. So they rounded up all these other men with learning difficulties. One of them died while being questioned. This is Soviet questioning. And another one killed themselves. So eventually they were released because they thought, it might be a truck driver because it was covering such a huge area.
Is it difficult to try and confess to a crime, though? Isn't it? Like, if you go and you're like, yeah, I did it. All right, well, where's the bodies? I thought this was going to be easier.
Yeah.
You'd just be like, they'd just go, all right, yeah, you did it. Okay, we'll lock you up, but you've got to have your own evidence, haven't you?
That's true, yeah. You've got to know what they don't know, haven't you? So they thought it was these guys, so they wasted their time massively with them for a bit. And then they thought it might be a truck driver, but we know it was because his job carried him around. But I think they were fairly thorough. They conducted 150,000 interviews. And when they would find someone, they would follow their movements secretly. Like, I do actually think that they threw some expertise at it. I mean, ultimately, it amounted to fuck all, but there we go.
They were having a go. They were doing what they should have done.
They were having a go, mate.
Yeah.
So by September 1984, they knew the blood type. They knew that 10% of the population had it, but the murders had just spiked. They started getting more and more frequent. So they're like, oh, shit. Because from January to September of 1984, there were 50 new murders. So they were like, we're going to have to do something about this. So they went as bus stations. So they would monitor bus stations. Now,
which should be continually monitored, in my opinion, because there's a lot of weird stuff goes on in bus stations.
Definitely. I think the megabus is probably one of the biggest killers of people we've got. Do you have megabuses exist in America, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Because they always ask you which country you want to buy them in.
Yeah, they do exist in America, megabus. I wonder if they've got to be as hideous as ours, and ours don't go as far distances as an American one would travel.
Do you remember when they had a megabus gold, but it went bust?
Yeah.
And it was that you could sleep in it.
It had beds in it, didn't it?
Yeah, that's horrible.
That's like a really sort of council version of Mile High Club. I think that's the most snobby thing I've ever said, and I'm so sorry. That is very unlike me. Maybe it's because I don't feel well.
But aren't they like coffins? That like those beds that you kind of slide in.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you could do. I think you could do a hand shandy and not much more.
Yeah, I don't think there's. Although if you were Chikatilo, you could go all the way.
Oh yeah, that's do a Chikatilo. God, I bet there's porn about that.
I'm not looking.
No, I'm not looking either. But do let us know on Twitter. So Alexander, Zonovsky was he was a police officer and he was monitoring the bus station. So he's watching. He sees this tall guy with glasses on wandering around aimlessly through the crowd, but stopping and being really drawn to little girls and young girls. Yeah. So he goes up to him and he goes, right, I need to see your papers. And it says on his papers that he's part of basically a wing of the KGB. So he was like, off you go, sir. Sorry for ever speaking to you.
That's like something you'd buy in a toy shop, like with a sheriff's badge and something else. And like, there's my papers from the KGB.
Exactly.
Like, it's just bizarre, isn't it?
It's mad, isn't it? And this is, so in the 80s you could just flash KGB papers and they'd let you go. Yeah, which is presumably in the 70s and the BBC what they did as well. Like, don't worry, with a beep. So they did actually put loads of plainclothes officers around the place. They knew who's doing it in forests, at train stations. So they had at one point 350 plainclothes police officers working on farms, in train stations. But what happened so many of the times is someone would just go missing and they'd be like, we were there and no one saw anything. Yeah. So they just didn't know how to catch this guy. One of them, so again, this same police officer, Alexander Zofanovsky, they were again about to clock off in plainclothes. And he went, that fucking guy's back at the bus stop again. This is a few days later. It's with his partner. So his partner went over and watched him from behind a newspaper, like a fucking Wallace and Gromit film.
It's just brilliant, isn't it, that? I love it.
Yeah, it's great. It's quite quaint, isn't it? Yeah. In amongst all this, mutilation and cannibalism.
It'd be good if you had the newspaper upside down for an hour, wouldn't
it? So he would ride the buses, he'd talk to women, and they would knock him back. But he would just go and find another woman, and they were like, this guy's fucking weird. So they went over and they searched him and arrested him.
Yeah, and he had on him, this was what he had. He had a knife and a rope and a bottle of Vaseline.
That's weird, though.
A tub of Vaseline. It's the Vaseline that gives me the creeps. It's that gives me the creeps. Like, a rope, okay, a knife, yeah. Tub of Vaseline. Ugh.
There was a guy, I need to change his name. Let's just say his name's Pete, who was in my year in school, and I can't even, it's really weird. Everyone was just calling him by his surname. Let's say that's Daniels. Everyone was like, oh, Daniels is so weird. And what he used to do is, do you remember the Sweets Fizzy Jerks? Pretty delicious, except the ice cream soda one, not for me. He used to buy a pack of those every break time, and then he had a huge Vaseline pot he'd keep on his desk, and he would He had chapped mouth, wasn't even lips, mouth. And he would like open his mouth really wide and like crack the corners of his mouth, and then he would dip a fizzy jerk into the Vaseline. This is deadly true. This is deadly true. Into the Vaseline jar, and he would wipe it around his mouth and then eat the fizzy jerk. And he's so creepy.
A bit like in The Little Mermaid, where Ursula squeezes that thing and just puts it around her mouth and then eats it.
Yeah, it was like that. It's horrible. And I once saw him in Morrison's, what was then Safeway, with his dad dressed in exactly the same tracksuit bottoms, exactly the same t-shirt with the same sovereign ring. And I overheard him saying, "Dad, we look hell of a cool like this." I think he's probably dead now or killing people. But I can't remember how to spell his real surname to find him on Facebook or look up sort of police.
What if he listens to this, mate?
He definitely won't.
But what if he...
I don't think he used headphones. He was like weapons grade thick.
He might have changed.
No, there's no way. He can't.
No,
he can't grow a brain suddenly. Unless they did like medical testing, like when they put an ear on that mouse's back.
Oh god,
which is horrible.
Oh, it's sad though, isn't it? That little lad, he thought he looked cool.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, but it's creepy. I just want to know what he's doing now. Like, if I want to know, because I'm like, where are you serving food that I don't want to eat? Because there's no way he's got over that weird quirk of eating Vaseline. He'll have just moved it to where else he likes it rubbing on.
Oh god, don't. I can't bear thinking about it.
So, in 1984, Chikatilo was arrested and taken into custody. Now,
there was another point as well that he was arrested as well, from a train station, and he was actually covered in blood, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, they found blood on his cheek and he was washing himself in a pump.
Let him go, because there was no evidence for anything.
Yeah.
But this time...
Yeah, when he was arrested, he had this wound on his finger, and they found out it was a bite mark. Now, the last one to be killed had been a 16-year-old, and there'd been massive signs of a struggle. So later on, they found that he actually had a broken finger, and his fingernail had been bitten off. Ugh. But he didn't go to the hospital about it because he knew it would draw attention. So he got put in this cell with this KGB informer who was really good at sort of getting confessions out of people. But it didn't work. There's a law, Soviet law, that you can hold someone for 10 days... and then that's it. So they were like, oh shit. But the only reason they couldn't get him for murder, they had to get him on that thieving, didn't they? Yeah,
he found out, because we were looking through his records, and it turned out that he was in trouble with a previous employer. It was a theft of linoleum from his factory, which was a very serious crime at those times, and they were allowed to hold him for a long time on the theft charges. And they held him for a good long while, to give him time to build up a case against him, and he actually got charged with that, and he was given time in prison for it. How long? Well, he stayed in prison. He didn't really leave, did he? Because this, and he started to. The way they started to try and get this confession out of him was they told him he was ill, didn't they? Said he's very sick.
Yeah, well, no, they tried other things. Basically, it was like a Craig David song that they. They brought in this psychologist. What was his name again? I'm trying to find his name.
Was it Buchanovsky? Wasn't
it? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Buchanovsky.
They were 9 days in, and because they'd been going in hardball, being like, "What did you do to them? Like, we know this was done to them. Where did you kill them?" And he just wasn't responding. And then the the informant who was in the cell with him had sort of got it out of him that he didn't like it when they were being like that with him. So they brought a psychologist in who straight away was like, "This is the guy I gave you a profile of," because the profile was him. And then he was like, you're doing it the wrong way. So he read out the profile to Chikatilo. And was like, this guy will have had a horrible childhood. He'll have been bullied. He'll probably have some sexual problems. And then Chikatilo started to get kind of upset. And so he started to write about his sexual problems. And then he wrote an even longer sort of essay about the problems he'd have with women and how he had this rage in him. So he was sort of getting to it, and then he confessed on the 10th day. He confessed to it all in 2 hours, all the murders. So this technique was to basically go, whoever did this is really sick and needs our help.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh yeah, I am sick. Because they also wanted to trick him into thinking that there would be an insanity plea there. So like, this man isn't very well, and we need to help him and get him off the street so he doesn't hurt anyone else. But eventually they didn't let him have the insanity plea. Yeah. My dad tells this this story, which is definitely a bit of scene from Training Day, where it was so mad. He was like, you know the cleverest person in the world, Kiri? And I was like, it's Stephen Hawking, Einstein. He's like, no. He was like, there was once a man, and told this like, this was a story that he was a part of, who was on trial, and he didn't want to go to prison. He wanted to plead insanity. So what he does is, this man was brilliant. He stuffed peanut butter into his anal cavity, and then when the time came, he was on the witness stand in court, and he reached into his trousers and he pulled the peanut butter out of his bum hole and he started to eat it. Isn't that the most intelligent thing you've ever heard? I'm like, no, because this is a man who's eating peanut butter out of his arsehole. He's not a hero. There should not be any kind of statue. Imagine that, someone bending down and picking peanut butter out their arsehole as a statue in the middle of Manchester.
I absolutely love the fact that your dad just thinks that.
Yeah.
He heard about that and he went, that's it.
What a guy.
That is the best.
It's so mad, isn't it?
The cleverest person in the world.
So after repeatedly denying all these murders, he said, I didn't murder anyone, I just molested children. Which is so weird, because we've all wanted to kill someone, but not all of us have wanted to fuck a kid.
Yeah, it's like, I'm a paedophile, but I'm not a murderer.
It's so weird, isn't it?
And actually, sometimes the other way around, in prison that would probably be better. I'm a murderer, not paedophile.
Exactly.
That would be a better...
So it was November 29th when the psychologist was brought in, and then that was it. 2 hours later, he confessed to 36 murders. He denied 2 that they thought were him, and then by November 30th, the next day, he was charged. They worked out that between June 1982 up to November 1990, he confessed to 20 different killings that they didn't have as him. December 1990, he led them to the body of Alexei Kobatov, who was actually buried where he was killed, as was his MO. So he was buried in a shallow grave. Now, he claimed, Chikatilo, he was buried in a grave that I'd actually dug for myself because I wanted to commit suicide.
Oh, okay.
How the fuck do you commit suicide and bury yourself in a grave?
Yeah, he's not thought this through. He wasn't. He's a liar.
Yeah.
The guy's a liar. It's like one of those, I used to have this at school. Every so often this story would resurface with the same type of people. And you go, this girl that lives on my street, do you know what she did, right? She dreamt, right? She was dreaming that she was dying in a dream. She died in a dream, and she died in real life because she dreamt that. She woke up from the dream. It's like, well, how do you know what she was dreaming if she didn't wake up? Like, there's no way you can know that. Did anyone ever used to tell you that at school?
Yeah, I've heard something like that.
It's just...
They're like, if you dream it, you're dying, that's how you end up dying. I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's no empirical evidence.
Well, I'll tell you what then, if that is the case. I once had a dream that was so vivid that the Predator from the film Predator was in it, and Bruce Willis was in it, and Bruce Willis was telling me...
You've got really high budget film, dreams.
Oh, production values was brilliant. There is a skip in it though, so that does bring it down a bit. Bruce Willis said to me, you need to go and hide behind that skip, otherwise the Predator's going to get you. And I was like, oh, cheers, Bruce. And I went behind the skip, and I was like, phew. And I stood up, and I got shot with a crossbow through the front of the chest.
Really?
Right? And in the dream, I was like, and I died in the dream. But I'm still alive.
I've never had a dream of... I might have told this again. I'm worried that this is just rehashed stories, this whole thing. But I had a really vivid dream. I don't remember my dreams. I don't know why. I'll remember maybe 3 dreams a year. So I had this and the only time I usually remember it is when I wake myself up crying. So I had this dream that my brilliant, wonderful father passed away. And the dream is like us going to the funeral. And I just woke up in hysterics. And it was so vivid, I just had to phone him straight away. I couldn't separate, you can't separate. Yeah. Look, so I went out to the ginnel behind our house, and I was like in my dressing gown, in floods of tears, like, Dad, you're alive. And this woman came out from the back of the other houses because she thought that my partner had been knocking me about. I was like, it's fine. I just thought my dad was dead, and my dad was like, oh, Kiri, calm down. Calm down. I was like, and he's like, I'm not dead. I mean, no doubt I'll be gone in the next 6 years. But this morning, right now, I'm not dead. For fuck's sake, Dad. My dad is desperate to die. I swear to God. He loves talking about dying more than anything else. He loves it. He absolutely loves it.
He can't wait.
I was talking about this with my brother the other day. I told my brother this story, and he went, oh, I phoned him the other day, and he said, oh, we've gone for a boiler with a 15-year warranty, so no doubt that'll live in the house longer than I will. But like, he loves it. He absolutely loves to talk about himself dying. Is this not a normal thing?
I don't think so. I mean, I talk about me dying, but...
No, my dad is obsessed with when he's going to die, how he's going to die, how soon he's going to die. He genuinely can't... I think he's going to... You know when they found Jimmy Savile, there's this urban legend that he was found smiling with his fingers crossed over his chest. I think my dad will be doing the same thing because he's finally achieved his lifetime ambition of fucking dying.
What do you want to do? Just die.
Yeah. To show, go, I told you so.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Dead. Okay.
That's what my dad does, is retired because he can't actually do a job interview. Anyway, so yeah, apparently he was in this shallow grave that he dug for himself. Most were buried where they were killed, except one actually he killed in an apartment. And he couldn't get them out, so he dismembered them and threw them down a sewer.
Oh, Dennis.
Doing a Dennis.
Yeah, doing a Dennis.
So this boy that he led them to, he confessed to killing him in 1989, led them to 2 other victims. Now, 3 of the 56 that he confessed to couldn't be identified. So I don't know if you can prosecute. Maybe that's only why 53 were taken to court. Can you prosecute someone in the recently dissolved Soviet Union if they don't exist? Because remember, homeless people you can't tell don't exist.
That's true. But it's still a murder. And it could be unidentified.
Yeah. I don't know where that stands.
That's that, isn't it?
So he was declared legally sane on October the 18th, 1991. Now, this is just after the Soviet bloc sort of dissolved. And this is why we know so much about this case compared to other Russian or Chinese murders, where they keep that shit on lockdown.
Yeah.
This was like the biggest event. This is like the royal wedding,
Yeah,
right?
this is the big do.
So there's a huge media frenzy, which is why we know about his childhood, which we normally don't know. And the trial was a huge deal. You said you remember it.
I vaguely remember it. In fact, in this very room we are sitting in, I remember sitting with my grandparents, and it was on, it must have been like the 10 o'clock news or something. I remember seeing him in the cage, and it was obviously a report about it. And I just remember
How
thinking...
old were you then?
What year is it?
91.
I was 9.
Why the fuck are you up at 10 o'clock?
I was 9 years old, mate. Might have been a weekend.
All right. Okay.
Might have had a bath and then watched Casualty. And then...
Oh, that feeling when the heartbeat music starts playing on Sunday and you're like,
oh,
go
yeah,
bed.
that used to send me into such a rage, that... Because it was You've Been Framed, and you'd enjoy that.
Yeah.
And then Heartbeat had finished, you'd be like, oh, God, no, it's bedtime.
Yeah, I'd hope that I could get to the end of... Was it Corrie afterwards?
It was for a while, I think.
Yeah, so I was like, oh God, I hope I can get to the end of Corrie without them telling me to go to bed.
Wasn't it the worst being so...
It's so weird that when you're a kid, all you want to do is not go to bed, and now I'm like, well, 29, all I want to do is go to bed early. Like, that's my dream.
Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I go, not long until I'm back in here. What if we can get home at about just before my gig and have a little nap? No, and you have all these big plans, don't you? Plan sleeps. Never happens.
No. I love a nap. The time I sleep the most is behind the wheel of my car, unfortunately.
Oh God, don't. Terrifying.
That's how I'll go. I sound like my dad now. Won't be here. I won't outlive that boiler, I'll tell you that for nothing. This trial was something else. The courthouse held 250 and it was full every day because the families would come along. Yep. He was in a
metal cage.
An off-white cage. I don't know why we need to specify the colour. In a duck egg blue.
Duck egg blue.
It was an off-white cage, apparently. And that wasn't for to stop him from getting out. It's to stop them from getting in.
The relatives were, quite rightly, a little bit peeved. This was a huge thing that was going on. Obviously, there were reports over here. It was a huge story because I vaguely remember this. And he withdraw 6 of his confessions during the trial as well? Yeah, it's cool because he confessed during the police, but he waived his right to legal counsel when he was being interviewed. So during the trial, he was asked to leave loads of times. He would regularly interrupt. He'd expose himself. Twice he got his penis out, and his reason for it was, I'm not homosexual, and then whipped his dick out. I'm not sure there's a correlation between any of those. No, he was also shouting and singing, wasn't he, during the thing? Yeah. Just being generally disruptive, all the while wearing a shirt with the Olympic rings on it. Yeah. Which is just weird. It's not even the darkest things, because do you remember when Russia had the Olympics recently,
And then there was this amazing opening ceremony. I mean, it's nothing on London because ours was a huge tribute to the NHS, which is brilliant. It was really funny afterwards. The Tory MPs were like, "Oh, Marxist propaganda, is it?" Anyway, they had that big thing at the end with the fireworks and the 5 rings, and the last ring didn't open. Oh. And then a week later, the guy who was responsible for that was found dead. So
really,
yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, he waived his right to legal counsel, so all this stuff was... He sort of withdrew 6 of the confessions during the trial, but he was refusing to answer questions, he was having to be removed from courts. In fact, he demanded in July 1992 that there was a new judge. He said, "This judge has already decided that I'm guilty, and I don't think that's right." And his defence said, "Yeah, we agree." And then the judge went to the prosecutor. "Well, do you agree that I've decided he's guilty?" And the prosecutor went, "Actually, yeah, you are. You are going in a bit hard." So what happened was the judge fired the prosecutor. He's
right.
like, so this is it. And he kept arguing with the judge and going, "This isn't your show. This isn't your funeral. This is my court trial." So it was so crazy. Now, during the final arguments on August the 9th, he was removed from the court. In fact, his sentencing was postponed, because the brother of Lydia Alkaneskov, who was a 17-year-old girl who was killed in August 1984, he threw a chunk of metal at him and it hit him in the chest, and they went to go and arrest him, but all the people in the dock just made a human shield around this guy, and he was never arrested. So yes, it was absolutely mad. And then on October the 14th, they read out all the murders and all the charges against him, and it took a day to do it.
Oh,
so the next day, October the 15th, he was found guilty of 52 out of the 53 murders. I've already told you my problem with that. And when he found out, he kicked the bench across his cage, which is not like... I mean, that's what you do when you're surprised about the outcome, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he just...
And he was shouting stuff at them, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was shouting all obscenities and various things, and the family wanted... They were like, don't sentence him to death, just bring him over to us, we'll sort him out.
Yeah.
They wanted to, well, quite rightly, batter him.
Yeah.
He's shouting abuse at people, he's getting his dick out again, can't keep it in.
He called them swindlers
That's
as well.
what he called them, yeah, swindlers. That's, like you say, nobody uses that term, swindlers, anymore.
Not in the 90s, no. Swindler's dead and buried, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah, it's like no one uses the word hobby now. Hobby's dead. Swindlers is... I might have told this story again, I'm sorry, but it's a really funny word to me, because my friend told me about doing a play with his mate, who had to come on and just say the line, "The usual bunch of swindlers." But because it was his only line, he used to go, "Oh, the usual bunch of swindlers." So, like, every time he had to do his line, it would just get more and more, like, he'd try and show all his range in the line. So I was laughing when I read about Chikatilo calling them swindlers, because I imagine him going, "The usual bunch of swindlers."
I'm intrigued to not play it well.
Yeah, me too, because I'm like, what play was this?
Usual bunch of swindlers.
So he received a death sentence.
Yeah.
The judge said that was the only thing that he would be able to give him in these, because it was really difficult for them, because for ages they had to get a confession because they only had circumstantial evidence. Because when they searched his house, because don't forget he was discounted, and they found out that when they got the semen sample, that I think his semen was traces of A and his blood was B, which is why they were looking for an A-B killer. But the problem is that with a semen, you can't just ask for it. They have to volunteer it. You can't get a warrant for semen. You can't insist someone wanks themselves off.
I've got a warrant to wank you off here.
What a job!
It's like something you'd get from Ann Summers, isn't it? You know when they sell those awful
those tokens.
Those
that you give to
tokens,
people.
like
I owe you
one, something like, "Oh, I've got a token here for a one-hand job."
A warrant for a wank job. I love it. But they searched his house and they found 23 knives, but he could have just been going on Saturday Kitchen. So, like, it was all some circumstantial, so they needed these confessions, some of which he gave up during the court, but it didn't matter. He still got convicted. 52. So death sentence. Now, January the 4th, 1994, everyone's back in work. That would have been first day back in work, wouldn't it? Boris Yeltsin refused his last appeal. Mm-hmm. So, on February the 14th of 1994, Valentine's Day...
Yeah, lovely.
He was shot behind the ear in a soundproof room,
Yep.
which is really weird, isn't it? Because someone will have had to have gone into that room and killed a man by shooting them between the ears, would have seen their brains spatter against the wall, and then have to go home and have reluctant sex with their wife that night. Or maybe the best sex they ever had. Who knew? That could have been what got them spicy.
Oh, so that's what it is.
But it doesn't end here, because there's loads of weird stuff attached to this case, isn't there?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of things. There was a rumour, and it turned out to be a rumour, that the Japanese wanted his brain for £1 million. Now,
it sounds like a line from Austin Powers. The Japanese will have your brain for £1 million.
It does. But I hate it when you see stuff like that. They just never say, like, what part of the Japanese nation wanted the brain. Some scientific institute, just the Japanese want his brain. Probably want to cook it with something disgusting.
It's like those vague things you're like, oh, you can't eat on holiday because they use one hand to like, wipe their ass and the other one to make the food, and sometimes you see them making food with both hands and shut up.
Like, you know, the bloody Japanese want his brain. That turned out to be a rumour. There was an article in Newsweek in 1999 that was about Rostov-on-Don, and it was saying about how many murders and things that had happened there. So there's been 29 murders and sexual deviance around in the last 10 years. They said it was like the serial killer capital of the world. You say it's Adelaide.
I'd heard it was Adelaide, but I mean, it looks like there's a new contender.
Yeah. Now, Buchanovsky, the chap who managed to get the criminal profile of Chikatilo and the confession, as it turned out, this really surprised me, and I'm going to look this up myself, see what happened with this. He was working with a serial killer that was still at large to work out the connections between the human brain and killing, and he wouldn't break his confidence because he said, no, this is a very important study that I'm doing.
So he did it. What?
How do you meet them? How do they get in touch? This is 1999. No one's really. The internet still.
It's you, innit? I don't know. But thing in a postcard, unless he, because it does sound really Hannibal Lecter. Unless he went to this guy, I know it's you, and I know why you're doing it, but I'm gonna let you keep doing it for a bit longer because I'm a psychologist and I need to know how we can go about stopping people like so. Keep doing what you're doing, pal, because it'll be a big favour to me. Yeah. That is so unethical. It's unreal.
Or maybe it's him.
Bum, bum. Well, that's Hannibal Lecter, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter is...
I've watched that film, Silence of the Lambs, twice. Still can't tell you what happened in it.
Oh, I think you find in an earlier film that he was sort of this really famous psychologist who was helping what was Edward Norton's character find a killer that is himself.
I think I have seen that film, but again...
But Silence of the Lambs is fucking blinding. You would really like that. Now we're just on to films now.
Sorry.
Another film that Rachel hasn't watched. Jesus Christ.
I'll get round to it, mate. I'll sort it. So that's a weird thing. Another strange occurrence is his son, Yuri, who changed his surname.
Geller.
To something else.
He's been bending spoons for 10 years.
He, actually, to bring it back to him, Yuri Geller really reminds me of CJ from Eggheads.
Yeah, he does. You know, when I was doing jury duty, it's really boring if you've not done it, because I was like, I can't wait for my murder. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. It was just, I think I've told you this, it was just a gypsy bit, another for gypsies thin off. I saw I'm getting so distracted. I was in the pub the other day having a meeting with Gaines, because that's where we have our meetings, and the defence walked in, the guy, who wears the wig, who defended him. And he got him off, but we all spoke about in the jury how he was just like God, it's lucky he's obviously innocent, because we all hated the defence barrister, because he was like, he looked dirty for a start. Really? He looked like he couldn't be arsed. He kept sort of like speaking really quietly so we couldn't hear. At one point, he had his phone out and his bank card, he was buying something, while the prosecution, who was really like well turned out, and, obviously diligent and stuff, was cross-examining the defence. He just was buying something on his phone. And we were all afterwards, we're like, did you see that? And it just made us all really hate him. But he's lucky that his client was obviously innocent of what he was being accused of, that he didn't go down for it. Because we all hated him.
In a courtroom.
Well, you clearly are. It was an iPhone 4 as well, and I was like, come on, mate, you're on enough a year to have a 6 at least.
Even I've got a 6, mate. I've got an iPhone 6. Jesus.
Anyway, with this court case, they have, because it's really boring, they have a TV on in there with Jeremy Kyle on, and then they have some books and some games, because you are just sat waiting. And one of the books they got, I went and bought afterwards, it's called Spawn, and it's by Yuri Geller. and it's set in like a. If you go on my Facebook page, I've put pictures of it up because it's so weird. And it's like, oh God, I can't even describe it. But it's like a man running on the front. It's so weird. And then on the back, there's a quote going, "This is one of the best books I've ever read." And then the quote is by the 6th person to have walked on the moon. And it's so weird. And it's like every chapter is called like lust or laughter or money or whatever. And it's about like an alternate universe. And I think people think that he's actually saying that this is how the world is. And I think one of the first sentences in the lust thing is like, "The fat Japanese whore squatted down onto his erect penis." It's something mad like that, where I was like, I'm going to have to buy this. And at one point, I'm going to have to take 2 hours out of my life to read this all. So if you want to if you tweet us and you want to see it, I'll take some funny pictures of stuff that are written in there.
Oh, I want to see this as well.
Yeah, let us know if you're interested and we'll whack some stuff up on the Twitter.
Back to the other
Sorry.
Yuri. That's fine. The other Yuri, his son, he changed his surname, but not his first name, because what's the point? He was charged with stabbing an acquaintance.
Oh God, that's such the wrong word to use, isn't it? Acquaintance. Yeah. Because acquaintance is like someone he knew. Yeah. Someone who was known to him, not, an acquaintance.
An acquaintance, yeah.
It's such a... Yeah.
So that's something he did. And I don't know what happened with that. I think he...
What happened to the daughter as well?
Don't know, just got on with life, I think.
Fair play.
Yeah.
Fair play. You think this Mrs. is more involved, though?
Yeah, I think his wife must have known. I don't think she particularly liked him or particularly cared about him, but I think she...
I don't think you'd be that fond about anyone who pushes their semen into your vagina. No, it would put you off a little.
Maybe his kids were his.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was away from home enough, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't said during all this his kids were black. Yeah. Yeah, and then there was most recently, it was in the news again.
A copycat.
They think there's a copycat.
There was a young girl, Maria Glinka, who was 19. She was murdered and she was found tied up in a disused building with a bag over her head. Her father, Vladimir Gilkin, played a pivotal role in getting Chikatilo convicted. And they think because of the horrible things that were done to her in the state that her body was found in, they think that this was somebody who was obsessed with Chikatilo.
Yeah. I think the location was important to the case in some way. I can't remember how. It might have been like the factory worked on or where someone else was killed, but they thought it was someone just like those. You know, you have people who love Myra Hindley. It was someone who was a fanatic about Chikatilo. Because this happened not so long ago, about a year or 2 years ago, and they were all going, "Oh, fuck," and they thought they would start killing again. Nothing has happened since that I've seen, but they usually keep quiet on this stuff anyway.
I haven't seen anything about that. But that's it. That's Andrei Chikatilo.
Big one.
Yeah.
Bloody big one.
Yeah.
Sorry about the wait, guys, but it should get a little bit easier now because our workloads are... I promise we do this as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Literally haven't had a day together. Thank you so much for being patient. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for telling people about us. Yeah. That's such a nice thing.
It's nice. Really appreciate it. And if anyone hasn't had their colouring book yet, can you please tweet me?
Yeah.
And let me know.
I think we said this last time, but I think we're going to start a mailing list, so I'll put stuff on there. For you guys. And also, if you like us, just rate us or subscribe on iTunes because I think that helps more people find us. Although I know you creepy fuckers probably like the vibe that no one else listens to it. But words got out. Sorry, guys. So thank you very much. And next time we're going to be doing...
Robert Hansen,
who is my partner's favourite serial killer.
That'd be nice.
There's a film about him called Frozen Ground with John Cusack that's pretty good.
Yeah, I've watched it, and Nicolas Cage is in it as well, isn't he? Is it? Am I imagining that?
Probably. And I can't stand Nicolas Cage.
Because it's set like in the 70s, the early 80s, but at one point he's sitting in a cafe, and the only thing I could stare at, because I'm obsessed with continuity, was a TripAdvisor sticker on the door. Oh. And I was like, come on, no one knows a film, can't get involved anymore. Really irritated me.
Yeah, that would annoy me as well.
I was like, come on, he's not noticed that.
Yeah, the art department's really sloppy there.
So there you go.
So Robert Hansen, he's Canadian. Mm-hmm. And everyone says they're nice. So this has been Andrei Chikatilo.
Yep.
The Goose, the
Thank you
Rostov
for listening.
Ripper.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Cheers.